Which position groups for Michigan football this year are the most improved? That isn't which ones are going to be the best. This isn't a hierarchy, but going into the season, which ones have improved the most year over year? Which ones are quantifiably better? That is what we are going to get into on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Thursday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I know we said there was going to be a guest that's kind of been an audible. There will be the element in which we were expecting at the end of segment 2. So stay tuned for that. We definitely have some things to discuss there. So today what I want to do is get into this idea I had of the most improved position groups. So instead of doing it in the same sense as which groups are the best, which groups are, the ones that doing the type of hierarchy that we normally do, I decided to do it more in the sense of which ones have gotten better year over year. Again, these aren't gospel. You aren't going to necessarily look at it and say that's 100% accurate. These are thought exercises that we partake in this time of year. We'll have a lot more substantive, like, you know what I'm trying to say. We'll have something much more like that come after next week, because we have Big Ten Media Days next week. So it is coming on fast. It is coming on strong. It's crazy. So I ranked 11 position groups here. And it's funny because there's some here, and we'll get to the first 4 here in this segment. It's some of them you're going to sit there and be like, what? Why is that all the way down there? Well, it's because it's not necessarily going to be a big year over year change per se. So just keep that in mind. It's which ones are going to be the rooms in total, not even just individual performances. And so I'll address that as we get to it. So my last place, unfortunately, goes to special teams. It's the place that Michigan has excelled, but it's really going to be difficult in my eyes to replace Jake Moody in particular. Brad Robbins was stalwart as a punter as well as a holder. But we got the Tommy Doman, James Turner situation, maybe some Adam Samaha. Certainly there will be something similar where we start to see some different guys breaking in terms of returner, in terms of gunner. Caden Colasar will return. William Wagner will return. Greg Tarr will still be a part of the long snapping equation, I'm sure. So there's a lot to replace. I can't look at it last year and then this year and say, yeah, that's definitely going to have any kind of tangible improvement. So I'm not going to spend a heck of a lot of time on that one, but that's my last place. That's number 11. Number 10 is wide receiver. It's a position group that didn't necessarily get appreciably better at all. That doesn't mean it won't be. I mean, certainly by the end of the year, we could be sitting there talking about wide receiver being like, man, how much better that position group got. Look at how many more yards. Look at how everything really went as far as that position group. But you have essentially 2 of the stalwarts from 2021 in Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson. Roman Wilson has a lot of potential that we haven't necessarily seen yet. You've got guys that you should take a big step forward in year 2, and that's Darius Clemens and Tyler Morris. You've got freshmen that could certainly take a step up in Frederick Moore, Samaj Morgan, and Carmelo English. You've got Peyton O'Leary, who's sitting there just kind of waiting in the wings and certainly had a huge spring. But you lost Ronnie Bell. You lost Andrell Anthony, who didn't necessarily perform but had the potential. This was a group that I would have probably had at number 1 going into last year, and it's all the way down at number 10 right now because it lost. It doesn't gain appreciably, but that doesn't mean they can't overperform. So again, this if they overperform, then they'll rocket up the rankings. But as far as most improved year over year. Looking at it on paper, this one doesn't look like one that's improved at all. It looks like it's regressed a little bit. Number 9, and this is where personal performance can really change things appreciably, is quarterback, and it's not in the same position as it was last year. Now, the ceiling for the quarterback position is that J.J. McCarthy could win a national championship. He could win a Heisman Trophy. He is going to be in that conversation if he performs as expected. But those behind him, you're not looking at a situation like last year where it was like, well, you've got Cade McNamara and J.J. McCarthy. Now, Davis Warren, they feel, is a steal. Jack Tuttle, I thought, did some good things in the spring game. Despite everyone kind of being in a turnover fest all game. There's not like a 2023 quarterback that comes in that you're like, okay, all right, let's go. Kendrick Bell is your 2023 quarterback. Alex Orji and Jaden Donegal are certainly in that conversation. But this isn't a position where I look at it and say they really improved year over year. J.J. McCarthy probably will improve greatly year over year, but as a room, I don't think that it's really taken any kind of big step forward. Number 8 is going to be one where you're also going to think I'm crazy. It's ahead of quarterback because there's some good reasons here. That is running back. Now, how is running back number 8 on my list? Well, running back is number 8 because we know what Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are. It's the best running back duo in the country. It's more of the players that are behind them. Now, I think CJ Stokes, if he's gotten over the fumbling issue and the things that he told me on June 1st, where he was talking about, hey, I really, I'm hitting these home runs in practice. The coaches can tell you all about it. All right, well, I want to see it in a game. I mean, we saw it in a little bit in games. It looked like he had that potential, but I want to see it in a game. I want to see him really take that big step forward. Benjamin Hall looked really good in the spring game and certainly has a lot of potential. Kalel Mullings is part of this group. It's a group that I think has improved, but I don't think it's gotten necessarily substantially better. If this was next year and you still had the same cast of characters that are currently on the roster, then I'd sit there and say, okay, because you got Jordan Marshall coming in, Micah Capana, that it would feel a little bit more appreciable. But nonetheless, I have them at number 8, not because of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. I mean, they, as far as the position group itself, if you're ranking position groups, as far as pure potential, pure ability, they'd be number 1. But in terms of having improved from last year's status to this year's status, it's all about how much of Blake and Donovan improved themselves, really. And then who's that number 3 guy? All right. We will get to the next 4 here in a moment. Before we do that, listen. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Certainly, if you need a candidate, LinkedIn, I mean, that is the behemoth. That is the gold standard of ways to be able to see what someone's qualifications are, what they're able to do. And that is why LinkedIn Jobs, when you compare the already having a resume on file, you see what they've been able to do essentially, and then you're able to pull from that field. It's a no-brainer to be able to get that done. It's so easy to create a free job post on LinkedIn Jobs, and so many people will see it. Everybody's on it. So you do that, you add your job, then you can add that purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. Just like Michigan went and attacked the transfer portal to find the right people to help them get potentially over the top to be in this national championship or bust type capability, going and getting an Ernest Hausman, a Ladarius Henderson, a Drake Nugent, a Josh Wallace, Josiah Stewart. The reason why they were able to do that was because of the transfer portal. You can do the same exact thing with your company by using LinkedIn Jobs, getting the right team member to help you get to your own business's version of a championship. That's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, and it does so faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, let's continue on with my list of most improved. The most improved position groups. Again, year over year, this isn't the best position groups that Michigan has. It's the most improved. Think about where they were at this time last year compared, the perception of that position group last year compared to the perception this year in terms of additions and subtractions. This isn't scientific. This was just my idea. So number 7 is cornerback, and I know it's kind of crazy to have them there because I think there were a lot of high thoughts about the capabilities of DJ Turner and Jamon Green last year. They weren't probably super high. It was probably middling to some degree. I'd have to look and see where I ranked them at one point. But I have them kind of middling because on one hand, Will Johnson certainly has the outlook of that position group much higher because he is full on lockdown. He certainly can take away half of the field. He can do better than that even. He can get the ball back for you. The big question is who's opposite Will Johnson. Bringing in Josh Wallace from UMass. I mean, he was a starter. He was a captain. He's got that capability. So excited to see what he is able to do. And if he isn't the one that works, then, I mean, you still have Marion Walker, who has physical upside that you can't teach. Jaden McBurrows, Miles Pollard, both guys that were 3 stars that had offers from every school that is known as like DBU, essentially. So it's a position group that's in good hands. It's just one that we aren't necessarily that if they were able to have brought, say, that Ole Miss transfer that ended up going to Ohio State, if they were able to bring him in and maybe Josh Wallace, then you'd be sitting here being like, okay, number 1. Like that is a huge improvement. Year over year, it's probably slightly improved as a position group, but that's in large part just due to the ability of Will Johnson in and of himself. Number 6 is edge rusher. Now, no one's talking about the edge rushers in the same way that they were talking about them last year. And when I say them, I mean, we didn't know Ayabioki was part of the group at this point. We did know about Mike Morris, and everyone was, Mike Morris can be that, he's next in line. He's doing that, blah, blah, blah. You bring back Jalen Harrell. You bring back a couple other guys, namely Derek Moore, who's taking a big step forward, you would think. But I don't necessarily know for sure. Braden McGregor, you add him into the mix. Josiah Stewart, you add him to the mix. I mean, Braden McGregor was around, but nonetheless, it's a position group that I think is taking a step forward, potentially. This is another one that has a big, strong ability to climb in the rankings. Especially if a guy like TJ Guy or Keyshawn Bennett really takes a step forward and it just feels like they're able to get to like a 6-man type rotation, then it could really take off. But it's hard to quantify or even qualify what it's going to be because the big question going into last year is how are they going to be able to get pass rush? Certainly this year they're going to address that from the middle as well, but from the edge, it looked really good early, and then it just was kind of it was okay. It wasn't like Aiden and David, it wasn't like Aiden and Quiddy. It wasn't like Chase and Rashawn. It wasn't like Chris Wormley and Taco Charlton, right? So it's hard to really tell. Now, it has the capability, I think. Remember, I said, and I recanted, but I'm still going to say it, that I said when Braden McGregor committed on this very show that whatever Aiden Hutchinson ended up being, Braden McGregor would be a better version of. Now, do I believe that now? No, because Aiden Hutchinson ended up being much better than I thought he was going to be. I thought Aiden Hutchinson was going to be kind of in that Chase Winovich mold of being, I don't want to say try hard because they have talent that goes beyond just trying hard, but kind of that, right? Like, try hard, end up being a 3rd round pick and everyone's like, well done, very good. Instead of being the number 2 overall pick, instead of just being a full on game breaker. That's not what I expected. So Braden McGregor, I think, has the capability to maybe be somewhere in the middle of that, being like a guy who's more of a 2nd round type player. Josiah Stewart's gaining all kinds of love. Guy had 12.5 sacks 2 years ago with Colston, Carolina. And then Jalen Harrell, I think, is just kind of underrated. If Derek Moore takes that big step forward, I mean, this should be number 3. Number 5 is safety. This isn't a group that's necessarily appreciated in value necessarily, but I think it's more of what we thought of them last year. It's like, oh yeah, it's pretty good. To now, like, Rod Moore, you're one of the best returning guys in the country. Makari Page, you were not even necessarily in the conversation. It was more, it was more of, can you step up? Will you step up? And he did. RJ Moten's gone, but you've got a couple guys that are younger that you sit there and look at and say, okay. Keon Asab, Zeke Berry, those guys should be in the mix. Caden Colasar returns from his injury as well. Quentin Johnson started seeing more opportunities late in the year. It's just, it's in a much better position than it was not too long ago. So I have them at number 5. Number 4, weirdly, this isn't one that you would expect to be up near the top. And that's offensive line. And the reason why I have it there is because I think that there's I don't want to say strong chance, but a good chance that the offensive line this year could be the best that they've had. Maybe ever. Now, I really like the players that they lost in Ryan Hayes and Olu Oluwatimi. Olu obviously won the Remington and the Outland trophies. I'm buying into what Max Chadwick from PFF said on the episode he was on, where he talked about Drake Nugent as being a potentially better version. Now, I say that, I don't mean he's going to be better than Olu, but I do, I've long said I think he's going to be somewhere between Olu and Andrew Vistardis. I think that Ladarius Henderson has a mauler capability that we haven't seen at left tackle in a while. Because, I mean, not to impugn Ryan Hayes, he was good. He was very good. But between him and John Runyon, they weren't necessarily maulers. They were just stalwart. I think that now you've got a mauler in there. Zinter and Keegan have proven themselves. You've got a wealth of options at right tackle between the incumbents, Trente Jones, Carson Barnhart, and then you bring in Miles Hinton. I mean, it's a wonderful position. Joel Hottie, Jeff Percy, guys who have had a lot of time on task that aren't even starters, Reese Atterbury as well. They're in a great position. I think that this group has improved, believe it or not, from this time last year, which is weird because going into the year, it kind of felt like they were going to do what they did. All right. We are going to continue on, but I have something special. This is something these are personal conversations. This isn't from Locked On, but I've been talking a lot with Tom Brady's company, Autograph. And listen, we are the biggest Michigan fans, and because of that, we thought we'd take things a step further here on Locked On Wolverines and see who is the biggest Michigan fan. Even beyond the football field, Tom Brady is always seeking out competition, and we all know that to be true. And he's looking for the biggest University of Michigan football fans, a.k.a. you. How do we prove that? Well, trivia is a great place to start. So here's the deal. In the description, I've put a link to a short Michigan football trivia. It's 5 questions, it's timed, and it can only be taken once. So what's at stake? Bragging rights, of course, but also a curated list of rewards provided by our friends at Valiant Management. I've spoken extremely highly of them and the things that they are doing. All participants will unlock access to purchase these exclusive rewards. So complete the quiz by Monday. That's this upcoming Monday, July 24th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And stay tuned for more details next week. Huge shout out to Tom and his team at Autograph for putting the trivia together for us. All right. Make sure that you check out that Autograph thing that I talked to you about there. It's very cool. I'm excited to see how that goes. And it's a partnership we've been trying to work it out for a couple weeks here, and this was the best way to do it here on Locked On Wolverines, we felt. And it's just a personal partnership between me and Autograph. Just want to delineate that. This is a personal partnership. All right. Top 3 most improved positions from last year to this year. Believe it or not, I have tight ends at number 3. in a way, I'm cheating because I'm kind of, Eric All didn't really. We were looking at tight ends being like, man, how do you stop Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker? Well, Eric All played a game, won. So it wasn't like he was heavily involved. So I'm kind of like looking at less of the preseason and more of what the position group ended up being kind of after that. So, I mean, it really was Luke Schoonmaker pretty much all the way as far as being the guy who really, was Luke and Joel Honigford and a tiny bit of Matthew Hibner, a tiny bit of Max Bredesen. This year, I feel a little bit different because obviously Colston Loveland was a part of that more late, but Colston Loveland has that Jake Butt type hype around him that Jake Butt had going into his second year. Maybe more so his third year, I think, is how we think of Colston Loveland entering year 2. You had AJ Marner, who I think is kind of a good mix between Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker. And then you include the rest. You include Max Bredesen, you include Matthew Hibner, and then there's young guys, Marlon Klein. You got the incoming guys, Deacon Tonielli, that I'm excited to see if they're able to get involved. So I have them at number 3 because I do feel like that's a group that is it's improved tangibly. And you've got 2 guys who can pass catch, 2 guys who are willing blockers. Maybe they aren't as good of blockers as Eric All was in, say, the Ohio State 2021 game. But, I mean, the way they're spoken about, yes. I'm curious to talk about the tight ends with Jim Harbaugh next week. A week from today, probably right around now, actually. Number 2. So there's only a couple positions left here. Number 2 position groups most improved. Defensive tackle. Now, we spoke about Mozzie Smith a lot last year as being that guy who's taken a big step forward. And that ended up being true. He ended up being a first-round NFL draft pick. And he was my buddy. And, I only went to the range once with him, but it was a fun time. We didn't go with him. We ran into each other and shot together. It was a fun time. And he's just a dude, and I've had a lot of great conversations with him over the years, and it's fun watching him grow up from being a recruit to where he is now. That said, Chris Jenkins is probably getting more hype. That's being followed up by him being an entrant to Big Ten Media Days next week, which is always a great sign for what the team thinks of his capabilities as well as leadership abilities. And then you've got all kinds of guys next to him, because that was the thing. It was like, well, it's Mozzie, and Chris Jenkins looked okay, right? He played a little bit in the Big Ten championship game in 2021, and he probably can step in. Now it's like Chris Jenkins is possibly, most likely, potentially a first-round draft pick. And then next to him, you've got 2 guys who are not even draft eligible after this year, in Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, the proverbial gifts from the football gods. And then you have Rayshawn Benny. And then on top of that, you got a freshman like Trey Pierce. And then they love Cam Good as well. This is a group that I feel is tangibly improved in the interior. Now, there's all this talk about the pass rush coming from the interior. I mean, I will believe it when I see it, but I also believe it kind of. I feel like this is one of the better defensive tackle groups we've seen in Jim Harbaugh's tenure. On paper. If there is tangible improvement, you always talk about year 1 to year 2. That's a big step for improvement. Well, you've got 2 guys that can do that. You've got a guy in Chris Jenkins, and did I even mention Rayshawn Benny? I mean, Rayshawn Benny stepped up strong. I've been seeing some graphic going around of Ohio State's best ever quarterback, C.J. Stroud, and it's a picture of him being pulled to the ground by Rayshawn Benny. I mean, this is a great group, I think. It feels like it's on a very big upswing at the moment. Number 1, linebackers. Phil Steele, listed linebacker for Michigan as the number 5 nationally, and who would have thought that? Junior Colson leads the way. Ernest Hausman comes in, and Michael Barrett. Those are your primary 3. We forget to talk about Jimmy Rolder. because that's how good it really has kind of been lately, in that it's just a solid group at this point. It's not necessarily having a bunch of Devin Bushes running around, but I would say it's better than what the group that was trotted out there in 2018. It has the capability, it has the ability, and I'm excited to see it go. And then there's still guys like Jaden Hood that we're waiting to see a little bit more from. I think this could be a really incredible group. I think it's improved greatly year over year. They had nowhere to go but up. They were number 10, or I did like a list of 10 without special teams of position group rankings the last couple of years. Linebackers tended to be down there 10, 9, stuff like that. And now it's number 1 and most improved because it's getting talked about as being one of the best in the country, and it deserves that. So I'm excited about it. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Make sure you go and check the link for the autograph quiz. Get yourself some prize. I don't know why I didn't say that plurally, but I didn't. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.